Grand Rising, beautiful souls. Hope everybody is doing good today. Today, we want to go over myth as or using myth for spiritual guidance and what that looks like and how we use that in our life and kind of what's going on in our life. Some things that are showing up and how, we're using it to help support our narrative and help move us along. And I'll say myth is something that's very I think it's ancient. In some native cultures, they had storytellers, and especially in Native American culture, they even have this kind of depiction of the storyteller where you see the storyteller and then all these children are around the storyteller, and usually that's what it was. It was coming around narrative, ancient stories, lessons learned, hero's journey, all the things that myth provides to us, which is so beautiful and fun, right? It's like story time. It's like you're right. It's like they pull out the book and they were like story time. I used to love that part when I'm like, ooh, you know. And that's kind of what myth is, right? It's this opportunity for us to have story time and add narrative to our life, which also makes us feel like we have some meaning and kind of provides us an opportunity to see how to move forward in our life. Gives us an idea of how we might move forward if we feel stuck. Um, and Pam, what do you say? Do you have anything to add?
No, I just love the way that you opened with like the vision of the imagery of that. Um, yeah, as a kid, right? You come onto carpet for like story time. I think that's how it's transformed for us in modern day. But there's something magical, I think, about this ancient way of being that we once had, right? Where it was community, like you said, this fire, coming together and sharing morals and values, right? Lessons learned. That's how we imparted wisdom and knowledge, oral tradition, and a lot of cultures. Um, that's all they relied on, right? That's why we don't even have records today, because it was just oral tradition passed down, like the Druids and whatnot. And yeah, so that comes to mind. Um, no, myth, I think, is a beautiful, powerful thing that we don't fully um, understand in some ways today. I think it's overlooked, and there's not time for myth, or it's just a story. I think the closest we have now is maybe movies, right? Realistically, an hour and a half wrapped up into action-packed entertainment, or something like that.
Mhm. It's true, and that's probably why I love movies because I'm not a TV watcher like at home. And my TV, when it does go on, it's usually a movie or a series, and it's usually some kind of mystical. It could be obviously, I'm not much of a romantic, as you know, so sometimes I'll watch these rom-coms or whatever, but it's mostly like action packed or mystical or it's like Harry Potter's and Lord
Yeah,
of the Rings and Wheel of
yeah.
Time and and I love. I'll tell you why I love the way that they do like movies is because it's always, and it's true, I think today it's easier to relate some of these concepts to movies. Like I'm always giving
Hmm.
examples of like, well, have you seen the movie of, like some movies that I like are the like Divergent series, stuff like that where
Mm,
you think, oh,
yeah.
everything's gonna crumble. What would you do? Like, and in this series or in this time, if you apply it to kind of what's going on in your life, you're like, oh wow, it's almost the same patterning or something like that. And there is a very tightly constructed, I wouldn't say tightly, it's loosely constructed, but it's neatly constructed pattern
Mm,
within like the myth story, right? It's always like almost like the hero's journey usually plays out in sort of these myths. Even in our own life, right? We go through this like hero's journey, and I know you love that like hero's
yeah.
journey stuff.
Yeah, huge
So,
background
but
there.
yeah, but movies, man, it is true because you are kind of like sitting around the TV, like if it was a storyteller and listening to the story that it has to tell you or watching it or listening to
Hmm.
it, right?
Right, and
So
hopefully
that
you're getting the moral or the value
I
or
know, right?
something.
Did you get the moral of the story? Some people, no, I didn't. Um, yeah, but the storyteller, um, and I love it because, who doesn't love a good storyteller?
Mm, right. I
Everybody
agree.
does.
Yeah,
Everybody
you
does.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking, I don't know how many times I've gotten lost in a book and, I cry. I cry at everything, but whatever. Movies definitely, but yeah, I think what I love about the book aspect, right, that the movies can't do for us is show so much more depth to the characters that we come to love, especially like the Harry Potter series.
Mhm,
For sure, there's so much there that's not
mhm,
in the scene, but when you want to talk about like structure and archetypes and myth and like JK Rowling does an amazing job of like capturing that, just as well as like J.R.R. Tolkien and Lord of the Rings, like you said, and other
mhm.
things. And I think that's why they're such classics, because those authors were able to just tap in naturally to like a story, right? I don't think they sat there and was like, okay, I need to have a hero and a villain, all those like structural plot things. I think it just naturally arises, and then our perspective, our awareness is able to like capture those things, and then life intimidating and recreating art, right, we're able to put that into like the page and onto the screen. um which is just fascinating to me, of like the coming to like the human psychology, whatever. But yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true because it's really cool, like you said, in character development. I think the reason that myth is so important is because somehow we feel tied and connected to these characters.
Hmm.
We'll even add, it's funny because it's just the other day, a friend of ours, we were talking about the Tao, right? Or the Tao and Taoism and all this stuff. And then a friend of mine's like, "Yeah, well, Winnie the Pooh was like the perfect Tao, and there's like the Tao of Pooh or something like that." And I didn't know, right? I had never heard of that before, but
Yeah.
there was, and
I
then
have.
a friend of mine goes, "Well, what character do you think I am in Winnie the Pooh?" Right? Because and then
Mm,
we're kind of wanting to connect and relate to these characters, and
mm.
sometimes people will be like, "Oh, you're like the character in that movie," or "You're like the character in this
Yeah,
movie," or "That reminds me of this."
absolutely.
So, and I think that's why character development is so important in myth and how, because it helps us to recognize, we feel some connection to
Hmm.
these characters that we call myth characters, right? Or mythology, or this pantheon of gods that we used to um worship or look to, right? It's like we were trying to embody that, or understand or capture the essence of this particular energy. And so if you look back, like especially like in Greek myth, they have such a huge pantheon, or even if you looked at Egyptian mythology,
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
even Indian mythology, right? Asian mythology of China or
Yeah.
India, or
South America is
all of
pretty interesting too. When I was in Peru, yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, they all have myth. So
Hmm.
what does that tell
So
you,
many
right?
similarities and
Yeah,
synchronicities.
yeah. And
Yes.
what does that tell you, right? It's
Mhm.
that we feel connected to the narratives that myth provide for us. And I think that it's so important that we recapture it, because I, like you said, it's not gathering around the fire listening to these stories that our elders are telling us anymore.
No, we've lost that,
Mhm.
unfortunately. But I think at some points we do have it though, because
Uh-huh.
I love
Sure.
having a fire. And
Mhm.
and I think it's more storytelling now. You know what I mean? It's more maybe letting loose of stress and
Uh-huh,
you know
uh-huh.
what I mean? It's
Uh,
not like survival, like, wisdom being imparted in you and stuff, but we've definitely find a way to modernize everything.
so it's
Yeah.
it's a bitch session the whole time. We're just
Yeah.
gonna bitch it off. It's right. It's
Right.
fine. Um, yeah, no, and it is like, yeah, you get around the campfire and talk, but I mean, I'm talking like, I don't know why this vision came to mind, because I kind of like the what is the series? I can't think of the name of it, but anyway, um, where they're around the campfire and then they're telling the story of like the wolf, right? The great wolf. And
Mm.
it's this native tradition where they're talking about the culture and how they turned into wolves and why they turned into wolves. And what is it? Twilight is the name of the show, the movie. And
Oh,
in
the Twilight
Twilight,
series?
the Twilight series. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, there's
Oh, okay, their heritage. Yeah, I know what you're talking
uh-huh.
about. Yeah, that's a cool scene. Yeah, for sure. The
Mhm.
shapeshifters.
The
Yeah.
shapeshifters where he sits
Yeah.
around and tells the story, and he's the older
Yeah.
man, and everybody's coming to him as this wise old man, and he's a carrier of this information, this wisdom,
Mm.
um, and he's giving him an idea of what's to come and why it's to come, and
Yes.
and and it's like this forewarning of like, here's what's happening, right? And that's kind of what it provides. It's like, okay, here. So it's like the
Mm.
elder holding kind of the staff and everybody kind of like listening and having that respect for the elders' wisdom that they've carried throughout history or whatnot. And it's like,
Right.
wow. But the myth and the storyteller give us insight into our own life. How do we tap into our own personal myth, right?
Mhm.
Because
Absolutely.
we have the so what do we identify with kind of, like my friend asking the character, well, what character do you think I am? And then I'm watching Once Upon a Time. I like these
Oh,
mystical, like I really love like mystical series. Like I just do. I've always been and and it was funny because for kung fu, we're like, well, who do we think that person is, in the so we're constantly doing this. We're constantly
yeah,
trying to look for clues or signs on how this myth might be playing out in our own life, right?
absolutely. Yeah.
Through different stories. Um, but like for personal myth, right? It's like what myth is guiding me along?
Mm.
And there might be some major characters that archetypes that we feel connected to. And what I like about that is that um, it can help us to understand what might happen next in our life or how to move forward or a way forward or what needs to be healed,
Mm.
or what lessons we need to learn and why that particular energy or myth is like arising in our own personal life, and how do we use it, right? Like for you, like what are some times where you've used like the myth to help you along and to kind of move you forward? Like what myth do you feel connected to?
Hmm. Oh goodness. I've had so many.
Mhm,
Um and that's the cool thing, like it became this huge turning point for me in my life, that when we were wrapping up school, you have to kind of go into like that thesis,
mhm,
professional paper area, whatever. And I was so drawn to the heuristic self-search inquiry um
mhm,
mode. And it was, discovering this new way of using myself as this case study while
mm,
using like outside resources, right, for this huge year-long project. and
mhm.
i and I named it discovering personal myth. And so,
Okay.
like you said early on, the hero's journey and these things, like it is so, so close to me. When I was teaching English for high school a few years back, I was teaching my kids the hero's journey, and really having a lot of growth and insight while I was teaching them, and going through my own spiritual stuff. And it was really just seeing it as beyond like us and the human part, like, right, like it's not something we just kind of made up for movies. I was seeing it as the structure of the universe and working through it in stages of development on ego levels and on spiritual soul levels of consciousness. So that in itself has been the most transformative, eye-opening thing to really truly understand and to look at yourself as I am the hero, right, I am the main character. That in itself allows this shifting and letting go of attachment to people, right? Because we want people to come and go, and we want people to stay, and we want to fit people in certain roles in our lives, or you know what I mean? But if you think about like the pie chart of archetypes, you have the lover, the teacher, the villain, the jokester, the mentor, like all of these different areas. So people are going to fall into like that role, and we're going to play a role for them. And so just being able to shift my whole narrative of like of humanness and, humanity and whatnot, that helped me really let go, heal, not have so much pain and attachments. And then it was going deeper. Um, and I feel like what archetypes, there's there's a part of me that feels like it's too broad in a sense to just throw around the word archetypes, because we're talking about personality traits. We're talking about the storyline, right? Good versus evil, ice and fire, heaven and hell, like those kind of concepts are archetypes. Um, so for me, I always kind of struggled because I felt like the archetypes, yeah, there's a story, there's a myth story, and I've related it, Wizard of Oz, which I've shared about, Dorothy and Glinda. Um, but on the other hand of that, it was like this own archetype, this essence of who we are, right? Our core of being. And there's masculine and feminine archetypes that overlap. It's definitely entwined with the natal charts. I've, been able to look at my birth chart and see attachments there. So I think that's a very good starting point for people, is to look at like constellations in your natal chart. Like I have Pisces as a sun sign, so that linked me to Aphrodite. But I also felt Aphrodite, and I think it's just the more you become aware of it and you form a relationship with it, it becomes easier. Because in the very beginning, it's not easy to tell there's some kind of energy, right? It's just personality, it's just you. Um, yeah.
Yeah,
What do you think?
I think that's no, I think that's a good distinction because I think most people would be like, we identify with the ego, the day to day,
Mm,
not recognizing that there's maybe these bigger energies. And sometimes it can be very like, even though we're maybe the main character in our story, we may not be the main character in somebody
mhm.
else's story, right?
Right.
So,
It's a
like you
spider
said,
web and all into
uh yeah, and like we're playing this, like you said, we play other roles for other people,
mm-hmm.
um, as well. So and it is bigger than an archetype is a big, broad, general term. I think it gets thrown around quite a bit, and
Yeah.
um, but it helps us. And I think if you say like, well, let's look at myth and character, and who are the characters within the myth, like even in your own life, I think it
Yes.
provides a story. So if you're like identified, or if you start to realize or wake up to maybe a god or a goddess that you're connected to, or an element, or whatever it is, whatever's showing up,
Mm,
you can kind of look to ancient myth stories and kind of see the different characters that surface within the myth. And then
mhm,
with that, you can kind of say, well, who's in my current circle? And what is naturally popping up, and what lessons am I supposed to be learning on this journey? So like, with Aphrodite, right? It's kind of like
mhm,
looking at, okay, well, what is Aphrodite teaching me? What is this energy saying? And it does kind of allow us to expand
mm,
our consciousness, our way of looking at the world, into something bigger, into the cosmos,
mhm,
you know, into this bigger narrative than this small, tiny container, mundane life that we live in.
right?
And it provides some kind of a right, and it also, I think it provides this, like, mystical, magical connection that, we've cut off so much.
Yes.
It's almost like people are just living this dried out life,
Yeah.
like dried
We're
chicken. I don't know
zombies in a shell of a body, like in a robotic,
why.
chain system. Like, like we are cut off from spirit. That's why people are filling this void that they can't even understand with every, kind of addictive coping mechanism, for
Mhm.
sure. And the thing is, too, with these archetypes, and this is the important thing, like they are wounded, undeveloped energies. And when you start looking at the myth stories, like how many of them end in tragedy? You know, how much of it is pain? So it's our responsibility, and this is what I have done on my own end and what I've like come to discover, like we need to change the myth. We need to, like, this is our opportunity to do the work and do the healing and evolve these stories, and in some of these cases of these archetypes, to give them a second chance, to give them what they didn't get, the injustice that was caused to them. So like Lilith, that's one thing I've talked to you, you know, and others I've been very open about. You know, my, because growing up Catholic, we were never taught about Lilith. It was just
Yeah,
Adam and
no.
Eve,
Yeah,
and you know, the whole woman's got to be subservient. So
yeah.
to find out that there was this powerful, you know, beautiful woman, Lilith, who was like, hell no, like I want equality and I want top, and you know,
Oh, yeah.
and was cast out and demonized. Like the woman's sexuality is so I've totally, my shadow aspect has gone on to not only the wounded side of Aphrodite, but Lilith. And with that I have found healing. I've been able, you know, to give what Lilith really needed, which was freedom and acceptance, back to, you know, I think the universal God's kingdom, whatever you want to call it. But I think it's, again, like we've been talking about, this darkness and separation that kind of chases after love and light and these higher vibrations, and it wants that unity. And in myth, I think that's where a lot of separation and darkness and undeveloped consciousness is really trapped.
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
so
I like
we
that.
can, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and
No,
I'm
go
just
ahead.
saying we can shift it forward and do a lot of
Mhm.
healing if we can tap into our myth and separate it from the ego emotions.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, I actually I like that a lot. You know, in terms of like you said, rewriting the narrative for these myth characters as well. You know, part of me is like thinking like for some of the projects that I did, right, when we were in our program, one that I did was La Llorona, and I think people um you know, so when I was young, like La Llorona, right? I don't know if people know what La Llorona is, but I'll just tell the story really quickly.
Mm. Yes, please
She
do.
is a mother. Yeah. So she, you know, she was, of course, she's a Mexican character.
Hmm.
Um, so being from New Mexico, it's very traditional that we know about La Llorona. Um, and she is the lady of the river. So they always tell you like this when you're a kid, don't play in the arroyos, right? Where the water comes because La Llorona will get you and drown you because she's searching for her children that she
Mm.
drowned. So the story goes that she drowned her children. Um, and it could be like postpartum depression or something like this, right? That the myth goes towards. But um, the guy that she loves leaves her. So, you know, he comes along, he marries or gets married to this lady, comes along, has no, and then has an affair with La Llorona. She has children and he leaves her. And out of her pain, her heart and her pain, she drowns her children. And then after she instantly regrets it. And so then she drowns herself. And so in that, she is constantly looking for her children in the
Mm.
river, which is like a tragic story, right? You're just thinking
Yeah,
like, wow, that's and I rewrote that entire myth.
yeah.
And what I put is that she was trying to get away from her parents who were not accepting her children out of wedlock and they drown. And
Mm.
that she didn't mean to drown them, that she was trying to cast them across the river and they
Mm.
drowned and she survived. And she went to the town to go and tell people, "Help me, help me." Nobody helped her, and they blamed her for their death, right? And so
Yeah.
then in sorrow and misery, she went and drowned herself.
Mm.
So, but to recreate that story and having, you know, with myth, I think part of it, and I'm sure that you did this when you were going through your myth story, is having a dialogue with the actual character
Yeah.
that is surfacing in your mind, right? Because this woman was demonized as well.
Mhm.
And now, they even have a movie called La Llorona, and of course she's the scary. I never watched it,
Yeah,
but
they
they
did
did
the same
have.
thing to Lilith. They made like a CD rated movie, like horror movie where she kills.
Yeah. So
It's
they
ridiculous.
demonize, right? And it's like
Yeah.
you said, like even if you look at um Medusa, right? And
Hmm.
her tragic stories, all these characters, not just women are were demonized, right? It was like there are other characters that then get demonized, and I think there's a lot of truth to saying, how do we rewrite these
Mm,
narratives? They even did it with like Maleficent, right?
right.
They rewrote that narrative. Maleficent. I don't know if you ever watched the movies. I thought they did a pretty good job with Angelina Jolie.
Yeah,
So
yeah. We watched those a few years ago. Yeah.
yeah, and
Yeah.
even if you look at 101 Dalmatians, Cruella de Vil, they
Oh,
rewrote her
yeah.
story.
Yeah.
So I think we're starting to realize that like we need to rewrite these stories.
Yeah.
They even rewrote the story of Santa to be a woman instead of a
Oh,
man.
really? I
Yeah.
didn't know that.
Yeah.
No, but while you're talking, I was definitely thinking on the masculine side of it though, like Pan, right? The nature god, the horned god,
Mhm.
that they then turned into the devil and Satan. And so like just that one god alone you follow, culturally look at how that has totally reshaped our connection because there's no masculine element with nature now. We just see it as a feminine Mother Earth. So we've even stripped that and now have like demonized the masculine element of Earth and made it a devil consciousness.
Mm.
So like
Mhm.
these things that we couldn't understand back then, or the things that had power, that we didn't want people to have understanding and wisdom of, it's like we stripped it and gave it a new narrative that's been harmful for generations. And I think it's finding this way that's personal to us and meaningful to us through these characters and stories that are arising in our lives naturally that we're just drawn to and have connection with. Like that's the beginning, seed. Realistically, you don't have to go digging around. It's just going to naturally be in your passion, your interests, and so yeah, I think we definitely need to rewrite narrative. We need to
Mhm.
explore,
Mhm.
what is the narrative right now? What is our current collective myth? Where are we, what are we healing? Where are we going?
Yeah. And
Mm.
I think so it's like how do you come to your myth, right? How do you come to your myth? So I can say that the way that I've come to some of these characters that resonate with me, right? First is to really like for me, I did a deep meditation. One of them came in a dream, like La Llorona came in a
Mm.
dream for
Yep.
me. I was never like totally connected to La Llorona, like, oh, all the time, right? It was,
Yeah.
in fact, I never even thought of La Llorona um, past probably the age of 9 or something like that. And then what she did is she surfaced in my dream, and it was when I was doing very deep spiritual work.
Mm.
So the reason we're saying that you can use myth for spiritual guidance is that when you start to do your spiritual journey, there are going to be a lot of lot of things. It's a whole slew of crap that shows up that you're like, "What is this stuff?" Right? What what is all this? And it's the unconscious, right? Is
Mm.
surfacing into the conscious world, and you're looking at it, going like, I should have left that dormant. What the hell was I thinking? And
Yeah.
then, but the cat's already let out of the bag. So you can't go back, right? It's just gonna start like slapping you in the face. I mean,
Right.
it's playing out regardless. So your unconscious subconscious mind will play out narratives without you knowing until you
Yes.
get the lesson. But when
Yes.
you really actively purposefully start to dive into your spiritual journey, it'll
Mm.
reveal it a lot sooner, a lot easier.
Right.
But then the easy part is it reveals itself. The hard part is, now what do I do with this? Because now you're going like, I don't know what to do with all this big energy that's showing up.
Hmm.
And part of that is looking at what characters are talking to you, because there's a lesson they're trying to teach you, they're trying to show you. It's this bigger energy, this bigger pattern. And when we
Hmm.
say gods, we mean gods with little g, right? These energies that are circulating within our vibrational frequencies and these stories, that narratives that play out. So once you do that, and once you're surfacing actively, allowing yourself this spiritual journey, the characters will show up. And what I did
Mhm.
is said, okay, what character do I identify? What's the nature or the essence of what I'm experiencing? Right? Some people, if you look at Aphrodite, right, which is a big one,
Mhm.
um, it's like I have this big sexual charge plus all this pleasure, and so you kind of can just look up keywords. That's a good way to start, is kind of looking at, well, what sensations or essences are showing. Are you feeling a lot of anger um that's surfacing, or are you overindulging in pleasures, are you drinking a lot of alcohol, you know what I mean? It could be the Dionysus, right? It could be, it's
Definitely
like
worked with him for a minute.
right, but you don't know, it could be like these different myth characters showing up, so you could be
No,
like,
absolutely. They come in phases for sure and different,
mhm, mhm,
yeah, like where you are in your path, you'll bring up different ones and then it will heal its story and a new one will emerge
mhm,
for sure.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. And I think, like, tapping into your essence of what you're experiencing will help you kind of tap into the myth that's guiding you. And the
Mhm.
cool thing is that once you really know that a myth is resonating with you and this energy is sort of like engaging with you, you'll feel it, you'll know it. Like for
Yeah.
me, I cry, or I get like, oh, too much energy comes flowing in at me. I'm starting to look at it, I'm like, this is way too much. I need to
Mm.
turn it down a notch. And that's how I know that I've tapped into the right myth that's gonna help guide me into my next journey or phase or whatever it is, or heal whatever needs to be healed around that particular myth. Um, and some of the myths, like I said, have showed up, like La Llorona. I was able to heal past that, right? Because I was I wasn't necessarily the mother, I was the child of the narrative, right? And I had to heal
Yeah.
this mother wound that I felt of not belonging or not being wanted, of
Mm.
of, you know, being drowned by the mother, metaphysically, basically,
Yeah.
or yeah, spiritually, or whatever it was, right?
Right.
It wasn't physically, obviously, I'm here, but there was this connection to, like, feeling like I was not wanted, and that's kind of how the story goes in La Llorona. Like, the kids weren't wanted, and then there's this instant regret on the mother's end to say, "Well, no, I do want you." And
Yeah.
I felt that battle, right, in my own mid journey, in my own sensations, like, I felt like I was wanted but not wanted, and I couldn't understand it. And so it helped me to heal, to have a whole new understanding, and what I would say is that the way that the narrative helped me to heal is that when I saw my mother, I saw her as this person who I believe wanted her own life
Mm.
and independent of children, without
Yeah.
children. And that maybe she doesn't want to admit that, but that is the energy that she puts off, right? Even
Yeah.
though she might not, and maybe she's afraid to admit it, um,
Right.
but you can tell, right? You can tell as the person receiving the energy from the mother. And so for me, I was like, now I can honor my mother as, maybe she didn't want children, and I'm okay with that. She had us anyway. You know what I mean? Even
Right.
if she didn't want children, she had us and we're alive and she fed us. She wouldn't totally abandon us, right?
Yeah.
Um, she fed us, we had a place to stay, we had a roof over our head, all that kind of stuff. But she was battling, I think, the ability to have her own life without children, and I think,
Right.
honestly, think if she could do it again, she wouldn't have had children, and I know that because I don't want children, and so I feel the same energy. I'm like, "But I come from you, so I understand that that's probably what it was,"
Yeah.
and even though she may never admit it, but that narrative helped me to heal past that, right? It helped me to recognize that, you know, she wouldn't she wasn't so ingrained that, and of not wanting us, that she gave us away, or that she just aborted us or whatever, right? She
Right.
did go through the entire process and raise us and all that stuff. But I think there might have been some regrets there. So I could then say, well, I identify with, not wanting children. I identify with how I would feel if I had children and didn't really I understand that, and I think
Yeah.
it and to me it became a bigger narrative of I'm sure there's a lot of parents out there a lot of and in fact, I started talking to a lot of mothers and they actually felt relieved to be able to say that
Yeah.
without feeling like they were bad or that
Right.
there was something wrong with them.
Oh
And
yeah.
I'm like,
For
"Yeah,
sure.
there's nothing wrong with you."
Yeah,
Um,
parenting's its own weird little box, I'm telling you, like, because you have to, like you wanna talk about wearing a freaking mask.
uh,
Parenting, like, oh, man. Listen, yeah, conscious parenting, that'll be maybe a good content
yeah,
topic one day
and
for
I think
sure.
the mother gets the mother it's hard for the mothers
Yeah.
because we're the nurture, we're the caregivers, we're the first thing that they have, they look to us for, it's just they come from us, we're brewing them and, the women bruise the child in their stomach for 9 months, It's
Or
like
longer.
and longer, and the mother, for the child, it's like, it's okay for the mother to say they didn't want kids or that they don't want their kids, or sometimes they wish they could just draw you know what I mean? Like
I will honestly admit I have been very open and honest about that. Like, I have 4 kids. Like, I had my first child at 16, and then I was 20, and I was 26, and I was 30. Only 2 were planned, and, like, yeah, I mean, there were times that like, if I could go back, like, I definitely would, knowing what I know now, because I honestly also believe, like, our it's a soul contract, so, like, you know what I mean? I
Yeah,
kinda go back and forth, like, you can't go back, but at the same
yeah.
point, if I could, like, rewrite my soul contract from right now, I would have them much later in life and with a
Uh-huh,
much healthier, divine, healed masculine and not their
uh-huh.
father, to be honest.
Yeah,
For sure. So I think that kind of the parent and the situation of the home life can kind of, play in to some of those key regrets. I think especially the younger you are,
for
for
sure.
sure.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
and see how it opens up narrative, so that's why I said
Yeah.
myth can help you with spiritual guidance because what it does is it allows you to identify too and say things that most people wouldn't say, like, "I'm not a mother," so me rewriting this myth allowed me to get in spaces with other mothers that I when I was working with this energy who really literally said, "You know what? I didn't want kids, or I
Yeah.
don't sometimes I don't want my children." Sometimes I'm like, and they were able to say it without feeling judged. They
Mm.
but they were like, "But I love my children." And obviously, I'm still there for them. Even though I have these feelings sometimes,
It's
I'm still
hard.
there.
It's so
Yeah.
hard.
Mhm.
It's
Yeah.
like the hardest relationships when you think about it. And not only that, but when you're having your own children that are not compatible, like when your birth charts
Oh
you know what I
gosh.
mean, are opposites, and your
Oh.
kids are meant to teach you karma. So like the things that your parents couldn't live out or foresee. Teal Swan actually has some interesting videos on like what our children are really meant to mirror back. And so, like, if so, as like a child, if you were never allowed to express anger or frustration, you're gonna have a child that's going to just show anger and frustration because you never got to exhibit that. And so it's really kind of interesting when you go into the dynamics of like this really, myth. You want to talk about myth story and soul contracts? Because
Mhm,
my
mhm,
oldest two, I mean, my oldest daughter and my youngest son, a very similar Scorpio sun, Taurus moon, and they're old souls. We've had past lives. We've done, some work in understanding our stories together, um, and then my middle 2 sons are very much new souls and like yeah, and so it's just very interesting. And I see with my 14-year-old who's a Libra with a Scorpio moon, I see a lot of myself in him, and so I see where we have to break some patriarchal systems in place
mm,
of like the way our parents and grandparents and great grandparents were raised, and so that will trigger things to come up, and I've had to work and do shadow work. So with our kids even, it's so much deeper than what we're aware of.
Mhm,
And when we
mhm.
can't heal
Yep.
our own wounds and pains, and our kids are, triggering things, and we're mirroring things, and we're not aligned compatibly through our birth charts because they're meant to shake the shit out of our world. But we have to put on the smile face and pretend we're the best mom or dad ever. And, do it because I've done that. The assistant coach, helping out with the baseball, and stuff's exhausting, and trying to be the PTA and doing the, field trips and the volunteering, and it's exhausting, and everybody pretends to be perfect. And I'm just telling you, like, I don't know. I get all uncomfortable in a sense where I'm just like, I don't want to talk to any of these parents. I just want to be in my own little bubble, and I want to get the hell out of here when this concert's over. And I don't
Yeah,
want to be like that, but it's just the discomfort of like parenting in a
but you
public
shouldn't be
space.
perfect because no one is perfect, and that's the
No,
problem, right? That
exactly.
becomes the issue. It's like because if you opened up to these parents and told them how you feel, I guarantee every single one of them is
Right,
dying to say
right. We're all
that
overwhelmed.
exactly.
Our
Every
kids
single
suck
person
sometimes, as wonderful as they
exactly.
are, and we love them. We
Exactly.
might not like them, and that's okay.
Like Bad Moms, I don't know if you've ever seen that movie.
Oh, I love those movies.
Or they just like, "We're not gonna be good, we're just gonna be the way we are, we suck, and
Yes.
that's fine."
Yes,
And that's the
yes.
reality.
I belong in that group because I try.
I guarantee all moms do because the so and but if you can see, like, even just this one myth and talking about how the myth was changed,
Mm,
the healing around it, right? That's how
yes,
the healing happens, that's the spiritual
absolutely.
guidance.
Yes,
It's being able to, say what the shadow side is without feeling shame or bad about calling
yes,
the shadow side what it is.
yes.
But healing that part of it, you can't heal through the myth until you recognize that shadow
Right.
side.
Yes. If
Yeah.
you keep ignoring it and denying things, and you don't ever like accept it, acknowledge it, and sit with it, then yeah, you're just always going to be at that gateway. You need to like enter into it by exploring it for sure.
Yeah, because then you become it, and then all the shadow that you're trying to deny I was talking about this last night,
Mm.
all the shadow you're trying to deny from a particular narrative actually becomes you, because
Mm.
you're not talking about it, kinda like with the cult stuff, right? I'm
Yeah.
like, "What's the shadow side of doing, mind work?" Well, part of it is like cults.
Yeah.
They all start off with these really good ideas, right? And the shadow side shows up and it's like, okay, because now, we're gonna this is the only way to live and this is you're all coming with me and there's this shadow, but you've got to call it out and then you've got to say, okay, what are all the ways that I'm not like that? And what are all the ways that I am like that? And really kind of identifying and say, okay, what can I do with this? But until you call it like it is, and until you rework the narrative or the myth that you're embodying or the essence of the myth that's coming to you, you're absolutely correct. You're just going to become it.
Mhm.
You'll become the shadow
Yeah.
eventually because you're holding it inside. You're not releasing it.
Yeah.
You're and then you become this shadow, the thing that you fear the most, you become.
Yeah, and it's all from subconscious levels, so you're not even aware that's what's navigating your life and the outside, right? The external that you're now attracting like a magnet to you for story and experience. And I will say, looking at like victim mentality is huge too, because
Mhm.
if you only see yourself as a victim and that's your narrative, um and you're just giving your power away to other people, especially as empaths, because I think this is part of our narrative. We automatically have this narcissist dynamic that we're, kind of set up with from birth, because we need need each other, right, in a lot of ways to grow there. So like that myth story of the narcissist empath is really, really powerful. And I think it's about coming into your own power, and not allowing other energies to feed and suck, like the light and the energy from you for sure. And having boundaries and confidence and self-worth. And so there's a lot of small things on that journey of self discovery that will come up, that will lead to your empowerment for sure. And those small moments, change your story, change your narrative little by little. Because if you see yourself in any way, like if somebody's hurt you or betrayed you, it's very easy for the ego to feel like it was attacked and it's a victim. And then it's very easy for the ego to navigate life forward, always seeing itself as a victim. And that's not true. And I think that's the worst narrative and myth that we can kind of entrap ourselves into, you know what I mean? And get caught up into the subconscious because you don't even realize it. You're just like that poor me mentality. Everybody's out against me. Everyone's going to hurt me. I can't trust people. I can't love people. So look at like the victim, the victim narrative, and find a way to like reclaim that, because that is one thing I see with my card readings when I have sessions with people. Like that's on a bigger myth collective story. That's where we all are on our individual path, and that shifts us, as a collective, is that we're all reclaiming our power and our true authenticity and dropping these, mass, and these wounds and things that we have hidden behind. And so I think coming back to the collective, that's really important to look at, victimization, as well as like how am I co-creating with the universe? Because these archetypes are coming in to co-create with us. And so surrender and opening to them in relationship is only going to build and strengthen that over time. So then it gets easier. It gets easier to feel them, to understand them, to witness them and be like, oh, I know who this is. Or the universe will guide you quickly. And then, it's like a puzzle piece and you're like, oh, that's the energy I've been feeling. It's this person or, this God, this goddess, whatnot.
Yeah.
Mm.
Hello, how are you, Bella? So yes, I think understanding the myth that is circulating in us, around us, and tapping into your own personal myth, as like Pam was saying, like really figuring out what that personal myth is within you, and then being able to shift narrative, right? And asking yourself, am I playing the victim? And there's some language around, I'll tell you what I was saying last night. Mastery lies in distinguishing distinctions. One of them is a collapsed understanding of victim and survivor, and a lot of narrative has changed around that
Hmm.
particular thing. It's like I am a survivor of this particular thing. And what that does is it reclaims your power. The
Hmm.
reason why the narrative gets to change is so that you can then stand in the power instead of putting the blame on others for what's going on with you. It allows you to recreate your life from a place of power. The victim story will keep you in that perpetual cycle of not enough. They're doing that to me. This and that. And so what ends up happening is you circulate kind of the same stories over and over and over of victim. Survivor is a whole other thing. In fact, survivor to me reminds me of the warrior
Hmm.
archetype, right? Which is
Hmm.
which is what I say,
Yeah.
when I think about that, I'm like, whoa, like I'm a warrior spirit, right?
Hmm.
And I'm able to, put on this armor, and I'm not a victim. I can stand up for myself, and so survivors are like, yo, I'm gonna say something about this.
Yeah,
Victims are just kind of allowing themselves to surrender to what other people do to them. And that's
absolutely.
giving up power. That's giving up power.
Yes.
So when you start to like look at these narratives and start looking at, well, what's the opposite? If I'm a victim, what's the opposite of that? Well, I survived something, and start looking at that. So that's how the healing starts to happen. I know that in um language is a big piece of it as well. Like how do we dialogue, or how do we put symbols to our understanding of the world, right? Because if we go back, language was really a system to describe or give meaning to our experience of the world. Like, what are we seeing? How are we experiencing it? What are we feeling? And language does that. It gives us an opportunity to communicate what's happening internally with us and how we're viewing the world. Um, and that's why everybody's so different. That's why we all can't be like, so then these myths arise to help us maybe resolve conflicts or something that shows up with us. It's like, oh, well, there's this conflict. How do I resolve this? Well, let's look at the bigger story or the bigger picture, the bigger myth behind it. What role is this person playing in my life? What role am I playing in their life? What energy am I holding on to? And how is that energy either hindering me or helping me progress? Like,
Mm,
what needs to happen? And I think the biggest thing is like having dialogue, narrative, being able to speak
mm,
with these characters, and there's many ways you can do it. Like active
mm.
imagination is one where you can just sit and close your eyes and have a whole entire narrative with, ask it questions, let your unconscious mind or let the voice inside of you answer the questions. You know what I mean? That's something that we did with our classes that I really liked. I think it gives you like this deeper insight. Like when I was working with La Llorona, a lot of it was that closing my eyes and asking questions, what do you want? And that's how I rewrote the narrative. It
Mm,
wasn't just me saying, oh, I'm going to rewrite this to feel better. Like I had to do deep, deep work where I had my eyes closed and I was crying and I'm like, why didn't you want me? Why didn't you,
yeah.
and all these things. And then a whole new dialogue emerged from that, which is the dialogue was, "No, I did want you, but I just didn't want children." You know what I mean? "But
Yeah.
I kept you." You know what I mean? And so then there was this healing inside where it was like, I can respect that maybe this particular myth was playing out in my life somehow, but there was this deep healing around it. Um, you do hypnotherapy is another thing that really helps
Mm,
um, for dialogue. You go with the intentions of dialoguing with this particular energy, um, like that. Or you could just journal about your feelings around it, or doing research. Like just like recently, like now, what I'm doing is research around the different archetypes that are surfacing, and kind of saying what myth, because also that you should be aware of is that there's not the particular god or goddess that's showing up, or the archetype or the energy that is showing up has many different stories.
mhm.
Like
Absolutely.
Gilgamesh, right? We have Gilgamesh, and then that story got all over the place, right? Like we see it everywhere, and all like we're like, well, why do we see the same story everywhere?
Yeah.
Or and so we see these narratives have kind of morphed. If you look at the Greek pantheon and then you look at like Roman, right? They kind of
Yeah.
took from, you know what I mean? If you look at Egyptian mythology, you see that there's like some crossover with even Greek. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so like there's all these like crossovers, but there's little tweaks and differences. And sometimes we feel more connected to another culture's way of describing that particular energy. And that can send us on a different journey of healing. So yeah, so I think it's kind of like you said, looking at it, right? That's kind of what we're working with at this
Right.
point, right? It's like, well, look at different characters. Don't just go with the first one and see, right, how it goes. So, hello, anime girl. And so that's how you can figure out the myth, right? Or how the myth is playing out. W- what about you, Pam? You want to add to that?
No, I definitely agree. It's like a rabbit hole. And for me, like as a kid, I loved studying ancient Greece and ancient Egypt. And then kind of lost all of that, right? As I got older and motherhood and responsibilities and stuff took over. So when I kind of naturally went into like the spiritual awakening and my journey started unfolding and whatnot, my myth story kind of awoke me and took over. It was this ancient remembering, as well as this remembering in this lifetime. And so by being reconnected, I would say really childhood holds a lot of keys to like the things that we were naturally drawn to and liked. Like everything was witchcraft when I look back at like growing
Mhm.
up in the 90s. I'm like, oh my God, could it have been more? like attuned into like my blood and my system and my way of being, and then I just lost that. um but no, I think it's a rabbit hole for sure, and it will take you further back, um from my own experiences. So with Aphrodite, because that's an easier one, right? Like you have the Roman, we have the planet Venus. So I think we're all kind of familiar right away with that energy. And then so going back, Aphrodite, and then going back further, like Isis, Inanna. So it kept taking me back to older and more ancient civilizations that were threaded to that archetypal goddess. And Anana in her underworld story has been something I'm still working with and fully trying to figure out. But that has been a massive part of my story and my experience, my origins. And it's just puzzle pieces, so it can be hard because you're only going to see and get revealed what the universe wants you to know, right? For sure, some things need to be a mystery, and some people may never have that knowledge or wisdom, awaken within them. But there's a lot of resources for sure to like just small steps to just kind of start. And I think even just shifting your perspective a little bit, it does a lot of healing, as well as it just makes the ego, I think, relax. To, you know what I mean, not having to hold on to people and places and roles, and understanding, okay, like I can let go now because like I learned what I needed to learn. Especially if you can't grow with somebody anymore, if you don't see potential and you're just stuck in this container and you're just living out your life for like other people, you know what I mean, in a sense, and you're not really following your heart or your own passion, there's probably a lot of you that's really numb and that you're really closed off and subconscious too, because you've denied yourself, access to that. So I think sometimes we need isolation. We need to be alone, right? We need to kind of go into like the hermit mode to be able to
Mhm.
explore our internal world, and we need to be really open and vulnerable with ourselves and have compassion with ourselves for the stuff that we find, because the ego can be really harsh and judgmental and critical. It's just wired that way naturally. So in the process you kind of have to rewire yourself to love and accept and embrace and integrate the things that you find about yourself, because you are healing again. And that's why we're finding these demonized, right? You talked about Lilith and Medusa and, like all these demonized energies. So we're healing in the process. So it's not going to be pretty. It's not going to be easy.
No, it's not. It's never it's a mess. We're a
Yeah.
mess in a dress. No.
Oh, I love that.
I'm always like that saying, right? But it is, it's a journey. It's not easy. So I would say like for us, just so you know, because we want to wrap it up, is that, we are here. We will be taking coaching clients very soon. Very exclusive. Excuse me, amount of coaching clients. So um we're just don't again, we want to do quality over quantity, but really we do archetypal myth coaching as well, which is like maybe helping you identify the current myth that you feel connected to, and then how to guide you through healing the narrative, looking at what the shadow side of that is, looking at the characters that are arising from within that particular myth story, looking at the people that are around you, asking yourself what you have to heal in order to get the lesson and to actually move forward
Mhm.
with your life so that you can live your life purpose, and really digging deep. So we will be taking clients soon. The website will be out soon, which is Women of Consciousness, and then we will provide resources around that. Again, it's deeper coaching for the myth story, but we also do a lot more, and we're here to support you, and that journey too, being the twin flame, which we didn't talk about this time, around that myth story, which is it's a myth in itself, right? It's like,
Yeah.
oh my god, it's such a
Yeah.
big pattern to talk about. But there are these smaller narratives that are circulating, to help us along the journey. And we want to support you. with that. So if you already have a myth you're working with, you can email us. We'd love to hear about it. You can email us at Women of Consciousness um, at gmail.com. And if you want to follow us on our Instagram, again, Women of Consciousness, and Facebook as well, we will be doing some live videos. So maybe you see our faces eventually. Rather than just hear our voices, you can see our faces. But we are here to help you. So reach out if you have any questions. And until then, we will see you next time. Pam, do you have anything else? Any final words?
Oh man, just yeah, happy myth searching. Just like go search around, go dig around and see what myths come up for your personal life because it will transform you, I guarantee, if you work with it. But
We'll play in the dirt.
yeah, I love it. Play in the dirt. No, it's always a pleasure. That's for sure. Yeah, good episode. I love it. I love this conversation, this topic. Could go all day, all fired up on the archetypes, but no,
For real.
thank you for sure.
Yeah. So have a good day, and we will see you next Tuesday. Have
Yeah.
a blessed day.
Have a great
Lots
week,
of
everyone.
love.
Bye.
Bye.